listener production.
Welcome to the Weekend Briefing with me, Antoinette Lattouf. It's your weekly breather from the news cycle because we hit pause on the chaos and shine a light on a remarkable human who's doing awesome things. And this week, I'm joined by Grace Tame, former Australian of the Year, marathon runner, Prime Minister heckler, sexual abuse survivor, and all-round powerhouse. She's lived more life and, to be honest, copped more public scrutiny than most people twice her age. And in this chat, we dive into what it really takes to win as a woman in Australia and just how much loss, rage, and unsolicited advice gets thrown at you along the way. With an election on the horizon, Grace also sounds the alarm on political apathy and reminds us it's not too late to get informed and make your vote count. Then, of course, we round things off with the weekend list. It's your curated guide to what to watch, read, eat, do, and everything in between, and then you can pretend you discovered it before everyone else. First up, Grace Tame. Grace Tame, welcome to the Weekend Briefing.
Thank you for having me, Antoinette.
Grace Tame from Tasmania. What I love is that you still live in Tasmania. You still return off the mainland. What is it that takes you back home?
Aeroplanes.
I mean, other than the aeroplanes.
Sorry, that was a very autistic answer,
I
wasn't
loved it though. I mean, it could be cruise ships as well that take you back home.
Oh, no.
No?
No, the floating cities, no. Very environmentally dubious, those. But also our planes, I suppose. What keeps me back in Tasmania is the lifestyle, the community, and the pace. It's slow, it's really well connected, really welcoming, and also the landscapes. I'm a marathon runner and I run a lot, and we're blessed with beautiful trails. We've got Kananyi, which is the mountain behind Nipalina, Hobart City, and it's full of trails and all the roadways in the early mornings because there's no traffic around. There's hardly any people. So, yeah, my family's there, my close friends.
You do run a lot, and you had just mentioned a moment before we hit record just about 100 kilometres a week. That's what you run?
Just to clarify, though, the elite runners are running double that.
I mean, I think you're doing pretty okay. And recently you were made ambassador for Nike. What's that collaboration been like?
It's been really fun. So they brought me on as more of a social impact ambassador as opposed to an elite runner because I definitely don't qualify at this stage as an elite runner. I've really enjoyed it because running has always been a core part of me. I think all of us as individuals are multifaceted and identity doesn't have to be a static thing. Advocacy is obviously a huge part of who I am, the work that I do, but also running, being in the outdoors, doing events with community, that sort of social connection via movement.
And what sort of social impact projects will you be championing or chatting to or hoping to put on Nike's agenda?
Well, I'm participating in Nike's After Dark tour, which is a series of half marathons for women that they're holding all over the world after dark through cities and parks and places that are typically unsafe for women to run alone. I think that's pretty awesome. You know, to run is a privilege and to run as a collective is really an act of defiance and solidarity. And
to run at night is terrifying ordinarily.
Yeah, if you don't have any light, it's particularly difficult. You got to eat those carrots, get that magnesium, get that laser focus.
But not only that, just from a safety perspective.
Yeah, it is. It can be really daunting. I like to think that I would outrun any potential predator, but I can't say that for sure, of course.
And I did note in your language when you talk about elite runners, I'm not an elite runner yet, or you alluded to, I felt that there was an opening, that is something that you would consider, or that is something that perhaps you're training for, or correct me if I'm wrong.
I certainly would love to give it a go to see if with proper elite level coaching and assistance in other areas, because it really is a composite of lots of different elements. You have not just the running, but you need your fueling and your hydration and all of the other recovery and prehab working in alignment.
Yeah.
I have a very hefty cognitive load at the moment with my work. I travel interstate very regularly and I'm doing events almost daily, and often I do multiple events in any given day that are quite emotionally and mentally taxing, and the body doesn't have the ability to perceive the different sources of stress. It just perceives all stressful inputs as stress. And so I would have to remove some of those elements to really focus 100% of my energy on running and improving my times, because I'm quite outside the elite bracket. I'm okay for an amateur runner who does events every now and then, but I'd have to zone in.
Your T-shirt today, allegedly, it's a black T-shirt, allegedly, and in inverted commas. What's that about?
I think it's just a funny shirt. It's a bit of a tongue-in-cheek reference to in the work that I do, and I know that you've got experience around this, and we're having to pussyfoot around the truth, and the law
and defamation.
Defamation, yeah. Well, I mean, I think the problem more broadly, because obviously we have different experiences of the law.
Yeah.
The law is a blunt instrument that can be weaponized. Justice is not necessarily synonymous with truth. So you can always save yourself with an allegedly, in my opinion, my honest opinion, I believe.
That's what I believed at the time. My recollection. That was my recollection at the time.
I don't recall.
I was going to talk about justice and winning a little bit later, but since we're there with allegedly, you've obviously become a household name because seeking justice through the justice system, navigating the justice system, becoming Australian of the Year. If I was to read your biography, or if somebody was to read your biography in 20 or 30 years' time, they could probably conclude that, Grace Tame won. She took on the law and she won. Did it feel, or does it feel, like a win when it comes with so much pain and at a cost?
Well, as I often say, many opposing things can be true at once. There have been victories, certainly, if we think about the fact that myself and all other survivors of childhood sexual abuse in Tasmania before 2020 were prohibited from speaking about their own experiences on their own terms, even after they turned 18 and gave their consent to do so under their own name. That is a grave injustice. There are no restrictions, and never have been any restrictions, on perpetrators. So you had a imbalance of power, the ultimate imbalance of power between an adult offender and a child victim who does not have the same capacity neurologically, physically, emotionally as their adult perpetrator. And that is reinforced at that structural level. Yeah. So there's a win there. Yeah. In 2018, award-winning journalist Nina Fennell created the hashtag Let Her Speak campaign, using initially my case as the foundation, as the test case, but in collaboration with many other brave survivors who lent their harrowing stories of injustice, not just in the context of the crime itself in isolation, but reinforced again by that structural silencing, lent their stories to the cause, and we succeeded in overturning Section 194K of Tasmania's Evidence Act.
You did say many truths or many things can be true at the same time. In addition to that structural win, What else have you experienced?
It's a very bizarre and unnatural thing to be in the public eye, in my opinion, allegedly. In my opinion, in my honest opinion, I find it quite jarring. And whilst it allows you access to connect with people on a really deep and meaningful level, which in many ways is the sort of the point of life, to share experiences, to share in the struggle, it also connects you with lots of people who don't necessarily have your best interest at heart or agree with you. And whilst disagreement is a necessary part of a healthy, functioning democracy, there are also people who don't just disagree with you, they actively hate you, pursue you, surveil you, harass you, and try to silence you. It's as if the bigger the platform, the bigger the exposure, the more vulnerable you are to lots of different sources of pressure and scrutiny. So that becomes difficult. So while there have been wins in isolation, and not just for me, I think more importantly, wins for the collective in terms of, shifting or completely changing structures in order to change a culture, because the two reinforce each other and drive each other. But at that individual level, it is an ongoing battle because you're also contending with narratives that are manufactured by a particular cohort or particular cohorts who don't like the status quo being challenged because they thrive under the status quo, which is, I would say, largely unjust and benefits the wealthy, powerful, influential types.
Yeah.
And whilst having a platform is a form of influence, I'm certainly not as well resourced as the morbidly wealthy corporate sector that often comes after you if you sort of threaten their way of life.
There's no doubt that you're a leader and a really important voice in Australia. Did you seek to be a leader or did leadership find you?
Leadership followed me.
Were there times when you wanted to push back and be like, no, I didn't ask for this?
There have been times definitely where I've felt quite exhausted by it. But I think, being a good leader is recognising that you don't stand apart from the group, that everyone is actually a leader in their own right and in their own unique capacity. And it's about encouraging everyone.
Is that true though? Do you think everybody is a leader in their own capacity?
Oh, some people are shit leaders. I won't name names allegedly.
Yeah.
Trump.
Yeah.
In my opinion. It can be incredibly overwhelming, the responsibility, and you don't always get it right. You make mistakes, and I've made many mistakes. I'm sure I'll make many more. That's part of being human, but owning up to them, and that's really important. But when you do, you get multi-directional pressure and you're, one person. I've only just turned 30 and I stepped into the role of, say if we just hone in on the Australian of the Year role and the continuing impacts of that over the last 4 years. I was 26 years old. The human brain doesn't stop developing until roughly around the age of 25. And so whilst I had a lot of life experience and particularly a lot of trauma that I was carrying at that cellular level, I hadn't been able to unpack it with an adult brain until roughly that moment. And then also at that juncture, I had media, the general public, influential figures sort of watching my every move and amplifying it. And again, some of the things that I said in reaction, because often you're put into situations that are quite unnatural and they're manipulated to produce a certain reaction from an individual. And those parameters aren't necessarily the conditions that you would see in everyday life. And so it is quite difficult to, as you say, navigate. You learn a lot though.
Is that part of the reason you stepped down from CEO of the Tame Foundation? Did you decide that leadership role was not for you?
Well, Whilst I am a keen learner and definitely found myself picking up the skills required to execute corporate governance. Corporate governance is not my favourite thing to do, and it's also not the best use of my skills. I think one of the things that I am able to do quite well is translate difficult concepts, especially in the context of child sexual abuse and child grooming, and communicate those to a wide audience and get people to join a conversation that is otherwise really quite prohibitive in its language, in its complexity, and its inherently uncomfortable nature. But, doing spreadsheets, my brain experiences the phenomenon of magnetic repulsion, where two trains are just not supposed to go together in the train set. And I just bounce off the paper. I just can't. I can force myself to do it, but I would rather run an ultra marathon than do that.
Yep, fair enough. And so what have you been putting your attention and focus on instead?
My attention continues to be around advocacy. It's the front-facing stuff. It's the community engagement, the stakeholder engagement, travelling around the country and doing the boots-on-ground work, speaking to not just fellow peers, survivors who've been through similar experiences to my own, but people who have this fundamental passion, this drive to safeguard our children and young people.
What about navigating so much of that front-facing, people interacting stuff, which is obviously really important and appeals to the masses, as a neurodiverse person, where people who you interact with aren't necessarily, reading your body cues or your language or what it is that you want and what you feel comfortable with?
That's a good question.
Because you are really quite, when people feel that they know you, they know your story, in some ways you become kind of public property, whether you like it or not.
Yeah, that can be difficult.
Not everybody has the know-how or the care necessarily to stop and to think, well, how is Grace feeling? What does she want? What works for her? What environment works for her?
Yeah, look, I think that one of my sort of fundamental principles is to treat everyone on a case-by-case basis and to treat every scenario on a case-by-case basis. I don't think that the experience of being public property is something that anybody should get used to. I've never adjusted to it, and I don't think I ever will, because it is, objectively speaking, not something that should exist in nature. We're human beings, we're animals, and we need balance, and we need
safety as well, safety, and privacy.
And privacy, whatever privacy means. It is, again, it's many things. On the one hand, and I try to lean into the positives, and I think overall, there's a net positive to the work that I do. One of the greatest privileges that I have is to be able to meet people who have incredible life stories, who have directly connected with myself and the cause more broadly. And they share incredible details that keep me going, that keep me motivated. But it can be really difficult in certain unpredictable settings. There are, as I mentioned before, a lot of bad faith actors who want to see you fail and will actively pursue that end. So you have to keep your guard up. I'm also, a deeply caring person, a deeply empathetic person, and I would that I could individually help every individual who reaches out to me. However, that's biologically impossible. I don't have the resources to be able to do that. I can offer my support, I can offer an ear and solidarity, but I'm limited. Yeah. So it's about connecting people with the right resources, the right support services, and also I think using the voice that I do have to put pressure where pressure is needed. We already have across the country. For example, so many fantastic Aboriginal and community-controlled organisations and support services, frontline workers. However, there isn't adequate funding for these services and for these individuals. So I think that part of my role, along with others who do similar work to me, is really putting that pressure on the policy and decision makers, on governments both at the local, state and federal level to adequately resource and fund those who need to be funded to lift them out of crisis mode. And then we would actually probably see a shift away from individuals who've been let down by the systems that are unable to meet their needs. You know, they wouldn't necessarily turn to individuals like myself in desperation, or organisations like myself in desperations that aren't able to meet the need because they don't have the resources. So, you know, that's why I spend my time putting pressure where it's needed.
Obviously, you have a really important voice in Australia, but sometimes you don't need to speak. You let your T-shirts do the talking. You've got your allegedly one now, but one that made headlines was "Fuck Murdoch."
Not literally.
I mean, nobody. No, but in a way, we're in an election year, and the sway that the Murdoch papers used to have politically and on public opinion, I don't know if I'm just being hopeful or inflating my own sense of, worth and impact, but I don't think they have the cut through that they used to have.
I agree.
I want to speak more specifically to what it was. Obviously, you wore that T-shirt knowing that it would make a statement, it would create discussion, it would send a message. What message was it that you wanted to send?
Well, it's, Murdoch is a symbol. I think I could have had a list of other key names and some up-and-coming names that don't have as much notoriety as Rupert Murdoch.
Like who?
Well, I mean, Elon Musk obviously has notoriety, but there are other powerful billionaires who exist in this untouchable echelon who manipulate the markets and, again, they manipulate public consciousness really in order to maintain their own wealth and power and control, which seems to be growing exponentially. There was a time, and it's only about 30 years ago, when billionaires didn't really exist. I mean, you had corporations that would have wealth in the billions, but individuals were not billionaires. And here we are, we've got people who have exorbitant, incomprehensible
amounts of money.
Yeah. And therefore it's a rigged game. And I guess that's part of the message that I was trying to send. I think, a tactic of activism or advocacy is to hit people with that sort of 1-2 punch. You get them in with something that's, eye-catching or that, as you said, creates debate, creates discussion, healthy, robust discussion.
It's an election year. Obviously, all elections are important. We want people to be politically engaged and consider who they vote for. I don't know about you, but I'm getting a lot of people sending me messages going, I'm really disillusioned with both parties. How do I vote? Who do I vote for? I'm not following. I've tuned out. What is it that you're hearing from people about just how engaged they are with the election?
Similar things. I think that it is disillusionment more so than disengagement, but there's certainly a case to be made for encouraging everyone to be politically engaged, because to be politically disengaged is a great privilege, but also political disengagement, political apathy is a big reason why we have so much, corruption in politics or so much money in politics, because a lot of the money that major parties especially take in from, different lobbyists is to help them with their election campaign, because they know that there's a certain demographic who sit on the fence, who swing voters, and it is worth it for them. It is financially worth it for them to put that money into convincing people to vote for them. So if we had more political engagement from that cohort, there'd be less incentive for the major parties to be targeting people who are not sure who they want to vote for. But in terms of the two-party system, that model, that is, I think, broken, or it has at least been very corrupted and is very liable to being corrupted, it doesn't have to be the way anymore. We saw after the last election in 2022 this surge of independents and a surge of Greens as well. And that shows you what people are concerned about across the board. These are cross-cutting issues like climate, cost of living, housing affordability. The price of houses has gone up however many fold, like tenfold or something like that, whereas wage growth has not grown in proportion to that. And then just like, and that's the fault of both major parties.
Yeah.
Several governments on both sides have manipulated the levers so that we've got this housing crisis. And that needs to be addressed. That's huge. And I do think that we need to look at our major geopolitical relationships and become more independent.
So what do you think is the root of that level of disillusionment?
I think the source of the disillusionment is multifaceted. You've got, as I mentioned before, both major parties over recent decades have manipulated the system such that we have a housing crisis. That's on both the major parties. The economic landscape is dire. Also, in the most recent election cycle, we've had the most blatant genocide broadcast into our homes, onto our handheld devices. That is impossible to deny.
People are, if they're looking for leadership or a change, they don't have an option with the two major parties about who will actually change anything, who will sanction Israel, expel the ambassador,
We've seen
put in place an arms embargo.
We've seen the Irish government stand up. We've seen the Spanish government stand up. We've seen many governments across the world not take a bar of this and call it what it is. And I think this really proves beyond a shadow of a doubt how much we are dependent on the United States.
What tips then do you have for people who are feeling that level of disillusionment in the two parties?
There are other options, and whilst it's difficult to dissolve that two-party system overnight, and I don't think it'll happen this election cycle. We will have a minority government, but when you think about how that crossbench is constructed, I'd be encouraging people to vote independent. I mean, vote with your conscience, but vote independent. One of my greatest joys as someone who's in Erica Betts's electorate is standing at the ballot and just writing 32 next to his name and then counting up.
Yeah. So vote independent is your message.
Yeah. Vote below the line. Get a mixture. We need a parliament that better reflects the diversity of our actual, everyday communities.
Below the line, vote below the line. Thank you so much, Grace Tame.
That's all right.
Grace Tame, and if you want to support her work fighting for a future free from sexual violence, you can head to Grace Tame Foundation and make a donation. It's time for the weekend list. It's when Helen Smith and I do all of the creative, zeitgeisty, heavy lifting and present ideas to you on what to watch, see, eat, do, and everything in between. Helen, what have you got?
My first recommendation is going to see a comedy show. We are in peak comedy season right now. I know last weekend we had Peter Rosethorn on the show and you can catch him, but there's so many comedians touring right now. Melbourne Comedy Festival, Sydney Comedy Festival, and they're also going to like Perth and Brisbane. And honestly, I have been going to a few shows and I just feel like they're just so good to just have a laugh and just decompress.
Yep.
And they're not even that expensive. You can go to shows for like $25.
And honestly, I went to the movies for the first time in ages and that's how much a movie cost me, $25.
Yeah, or more sometimes, depending on like Extreme Screen or all that stuff.
Yeah.
An easy website that you can check out a bunch of different shows is comedy.com.au.
Okay.
There's lots of different comedians on there with their tour dates across Australia. So there's a little bit for everyone. But yeah, see a comedy show or even just like have a Google on YouTube as well if you want to have a preview of the comedians first. A lot of them have done YouTube stand-ups before. So if you're not sure who to go see, YouTube them, Google them, have a little look at their socials, and I'm sure you'll find someone.
You know what I actually like to do is sometimes to go to those gala nights where there's a handful and you just don't know. I go in with zero expectations and sometimes come out loving at least one, if not more.
Yeah.
So you can kind of roll the comedy roulette that way.
Yeah, it's a great idea.
So my recommendation is if you choose to stay at home and not do anything, because it's my nighttime routine, it's this tea that I'm obsessed with. It's licorice and peppermint tea.
Oh.
You just like scrunched up your face in disgust.
I hate licorice.
But you know what? Even if you're not a licorice fan, it's hard to say because I am such a licorice fan. But what I love about it is it has the natural sweetness of licorice with this refreshing, cool, minty flavour. But warning, it is a mild laxative.
Oh, God.
Small caveat. No. Small caveat.
But you're having that before bed?
Yeah. But it's just so delightful and refreshing. It's caffeine-free, which is why I'm having it before bed. And I do feel like I'm having a treat because the licorice is just like natural sweet flavour. I'm obsessed. There are a couple of brands you can get. There's one called Puka, Puka.
I love that brand. Yeah.
But there are quite a few. And I don't know, I feel like I'm having a treat when I'm not, and I'm obsessed with it. Licorice and peppermint tea. Grab some. And look, the truth is, maybe licorice is a bit divisive. Not everybody loves it. But if that's the case, you don't have to share it with anybody. It can just be all yours.
No, I love a peppermint tea before bed, just plain peppermint.
See, I think that's a bit basic.
Yeah, but you can put a bit of honey in it.
Okay.
Because I think apparently that's good for you. I don't know. And it's good for your voice. So I'm like, oh, yeah.
Yeah, peppermint tea is great for you if you want to be boring like Helen.
Yeah, sure. Be boring like me. But my second recommendation is also a bedtime routine thingy.
Okay.
And it's something that I'm really trying to do to stop the doom scroll at night. So what I've been doing recently is putting my phone out of reach. And yes, it's hard to put it out of reach because you just want to grab it. But what I've been doing is I always have these thoughts at night that I usually pop down on my phone for like, I don't know, work or reminders or anything. So what I've had, if I've got a little notebook next to my bed, so I don't feel anxious or stressed that I'm going to forget something that I'm thinking of. I pop it down, write it down. I'm not picking my phone out to get that screen to like flash into my eyes and also then probably doom scroll on TikTok.
Yeah.
So I know it's so simple and we're always told this. Put your phone out of reach or try and put it away.
Yeah. And write some things that are on your mind.
Yeah, and then just write it out. Or if you want to remember something, write it out. And the next day, it's not going anywhere. It's right next to your bed. So you can just look at those things you've written if you need to remember something or whatever. And it actually does help.
It works. It's really good digital hygiene.
Yes. So if you want to have a little bit of a break, especially the news cycle right now is quite, hectic. So especially if you work in news or you work in a very full-on job, especially if you're a health professional, I think it's great to, pop your phone away, but keep the notepad right next to your bed.
I love that. Well, I love my fitness as well, and I do a bunch of different things. My latest interest is rebounding on a mini trampoline. Yeah, so this used to be popular as a fitness trend, particularly in the late 80s and early 90s. There has been a resurgence in recent years. If you don't believe me, go to Eva Longoria's Instagram page. She got her post-baby body back by, I'm sure, a bunch of other things.
Yeah.
But by rebounding, by bouncing on mini trampolines.
Those baby little trampolines, the little circle ones.
Little circle ones that you can get from Kmart or Bunnings for like $70, which is really the cost of a couple of Pilates reformer classes.
Yeah.
So it's a low-impact cardio workout. It betters your balance, and it was so fun. I added hand weights, and I went to YouTube, and I found if you do
that's a good idea.
mini trampoline.
Yeah.
And you don't bounce that high. Like I don't have very high ceilings.
Yeah.
You don't need enormous amount of space. You just need the space of this mini trampoline. And it was so fun. And you bounce to the beat of this song. And I wish there was a camera filming me because like my arms and legs and we're going in all directions.
Bouncing on a stupid little trampoline.
And like kicking my leg and arm in one side. And it was just hilarious. Like I'm sure I was doing most of it wrong. But I had so much fun. I had my watch on, which measures my heart rate. My heart rate was anywhere between 150 and 160.
Oh, wow.
Which is like full pelt run. Like this is quite serious running speed for me anyway. So I did it for 35 minutes, a couple of hand weights or a couple of water bottles, a $60 And it's just fun. It took me back to my childhood.
That is fun.
So, rebounding, mini trampoline.
Mm-hmm.
You heard it here first.
Yep. I like the YouTube videos to do tutorials too, because I would have been like, what do I do on that thing? But yeah, that's great. I think that's fun. I like that.
Well, you got plenty to work with, guys, but that is it for this week. Thanks so much for being with us and tuning in. Always a pleasure. If you want more of the Weekend Briefing, you can find us on the Listener app. And so you download the Listener app in the App Store. Follow us there. Otherwise, do follow or subscribe wherever you get your podcast from. And I just love hearing your feedback. So please give us a rating and a review for this epic chat with Grace Tame. And if you're feeling particularly generous, you can rate and review every episode. Or if you know somebody who you think could benefit from the chat, quickly hit send and recommend it. We will be back Monday morning where the team will have the latest headlines straight to your headphones, along with some fascinating interviews. Stay safe, everyone. Catch you soon.